Welcome to Autobiography Radio TV, and today's special topic. Not one has covered this man, which is kind of weird. The hero of Christendom, savior of Vienna, king of Poland, and a man who should be canonized. Jan Sobieski, and our special co-host who will be asking the questions since I have the book, the autobiography. So we welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on. I'm always glad to be on Ordo Militaris Radio TV, breaking new horizons in independent Catholic media, and to talk about this very important figure in world history, European history, Catholic history, of whom almost no one knows anything. So let's begin. So King Jan III Sobieski. First, what was he king of?
He was king of the Commonwealth of Poland and Lithuania.
And this country doesn't exist now. So when did this exist, and what kind of a country was it?
It was larger than it is today. The territory. I mean, you see Poland, a small country today, then small Lithuania next door. Those two were the same country, but also expanded eastward. They were almost neighbors to Russia. That's how huge.
So they included almost all of modern Ukraine too, and all of Belarusia.
Yeah.
So we're talking about one of the major world European powers of its age. And in what century did King Sobieski live?
Let's see, it'd be the 1600s. So.
Okay, so the 17th century. So, what was the Polish monarchy, and how were the kings chosen? Is this a different kind of kingdom than we're used to? No.
Yeah. Okay. I read from the Life of Sobieski by one of his relatives from L.A. who wrote the book, by Count Jan Sobieski, another Sobieski who took his namesake. In order to clearly understand the form of government, it may not be unwise to pause for a brief survey. The Republic had four great officers who were entrusted with the four principles or primary branches of administration. The Grand General directed the affairs of the army. This is similar to the Secretary of War in modern republics. The Grand Chancellor presided over the administration of justice and was similar to the Chief Justice of the United States or the Lord Chief Justice of England. Next was the Grand Treasurer, whose position was not synonymous with Secretary of Treasury in the United States, but quite similar. It fell to his lot to devise means of raising revenues for the support of the government, both in time of peace and for purpose of warfare. Next was the Grand Marshal, who was, in fact, a national chief of police. These four personages were called Braca Regalia, that is, arms of the king. So, then there's also the Marshal of Deputies, who acted as a speaker, but as he says, enlarged in vague terms upon the advantages of peace. So I guess you would say kind of like a Speaker of the House, but only in times of peace. Then two senators who were bishops. And it was quite different.
So it was an elected monarchy. He was like a constitutional monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
except he was only elected king for some time.
Yeah. Then it was time to elect another. And
So
another.
similar to the Hungarian monarchy, which was also elected. So tell us something about King Sobieski. Sobieski is his family name, but tell us something about his family.
Well, Sobieski's grandfather, the renowned Sobieski, on the mother's side, defeated the Muscovites in 1610. The Tsar was made a prisoner and was brought to the capital of Krakow. Monuments of this victory are still seen upon the ceiling of the castle at Warsaw. Once Tsar Peter was called into Poland to defend King Augustus against Charles the XII, the Tsar thought proper to destroy them. But the testimony of time cannot be suppressed. In the year 1620, Sobieski forced his way through 100,000 Turks and Tartars, who surrounded him in Moldavia, and was retreating before this great host, which pursued and harassed him during a march of almost 100 leagues. Having reached the frontiers of Poland upon the banks of the Nestor, this cavalry, now completely exhausted, was apparently looking into the face of certain destruction, so they took the first opportunity of escape, which is to swim across the river, thus deserting their general and his infantry. Sobieski's son, who was with him in the army, begged him to consider his own safety, but he replied that the Republic had entrusted its entire army to him, and he could not desert it. The infantry that remained was utterly annihilated before his eyes. His brave son expired in his sight. He himself was covered with wounds and lived but for a short time. His head was severed by the Turkish general and sent to the Sultan to revive the spirits of the Ottoman Empire, but was afterwards redeemed and the renowned father and son buried in the same grave. Upon their tomb was this inscription: "May our avenger rise out of our ashes." And the work
So
is, yeah,
so his grandfather was a great man. He captured and imprisoned the Tsar of Russia. That was probably the glory of Polish history, and a great fighter against the Turks. So now tell us something about his father, Sobieski's father.
his father, James Sobieski, was not unworthy of such a noble sire. A frequent history of valorous deeds tells us. One of the most glorious victories in all of annals of Poland was the famous Battle of Choksin in 1622, in which the young prince Udalas, son of King Sigismund III, had the title of commander-in-chief. But the one who was entitled to the glory of the victory was James Sobieski, who had taken command in the absence of the Grand General. 200,000 Turks and Tartars were defeated in that battle by 65,000 Poles. And the hero of the day, being as able as negotiator or diplomat as he was general on the field, was sent by the king as his ambassador to sign the treaty which the Poles was compelled to accept. By his James Sobieski's marriage with the daughter of the great Zololeski, an heiress of the vast estates in the possession of that powerful family, Palatinate of Russia, he had two sons, Mark and John, whose education he considered incumbent upon himself, and held definite ideas regarding the education of young people which were not shared by all his contemporaries. He instructed them in the principles of justice, beneficence, and respect for the established laws of the land, holding that a knowledge of those things was important as a knowledge of military tactics, and as unsurpassed even by military glory, in which each and every one hoped to shine. He gradually led them up to the vital interests of their native land, the beloved Poland, and instructed them to defend these interests by written as well as spoken words, all of which would be useless under an absolute form of government, but necessary in a republic. James Sobieski labored to instill in his sons the habit of application which he himself possessed and without which there can never be a great man.
A great father. This is a point that needs to be emphasized. If we lack great leaders in the world today, it's because we lack great fathers. Because if a father can make his son a great man and inspire him to be such, then he will do a lot for the whole world and for his nation. So James Sobieski, a great father. So what do we know about John Sobieski's mother? I heard you mention on occasion that she's a relative of yours.
Let's see here. Let me go to the Wikipedia.
Okay.
Let's see, John Sobieski.
It's a shame that we in the West don't know more about Polish history. Poland is such a glorious Catholic country, and in Eastern Europe, it is the most dominant one. And yet, we're taught almost nothing in our history classes about Poland. I guess it doesn't jive with the Masonic view of the world that Catholic kings or Poles should have a role in it.
That's okay.
What was her name, the mother of King John?
Teofila Zofia Zobieska was the daughter of Voivode of Wallachia and let's see.
When was she born, and when did she marry him?
She was born.
I mean, this is the mom, yes. So when was she born, and when did she marry his father?
Let's see.
James.
She was born in 1607. She married his dad. January married him on 16th of May, 1627. And Zolgrifo, or
Zolkiewski, yeah.
Yeah.
Zolkiewski, the grandfather.
Let's see the town. Let's see. Zofika is the city of in Lviv Oblast, region of western Ukraine. So they were made in what was Ukraine.
Yeah. Okay. So his that helped unite the crown. What do we know about King Jan Sobieski's brother Mark?
Yeah.
I guess it's his older brother.
Yeah. The eldest son, Mark, was of mild temper and docile disposition. His mother's favorite, and had he lived, would have been compelled to occupy a subordinate place to his younger brother, Jan Sobieski. So he died in childhood.
Oh, that's a shame. A lot of children died in childhood in previous centuries. One thing that many people aren't aware of. So let's get back to the future King John. How does he rise through the ranks to become a general, and how did he end up saving Poland from the Tartar invasion? And before you answer, I'll explain to everyone, the Tartars were a tribe of people, half Slavic, half Mongolian. They had emigrated to Russia centuries before and set up their realm in southern Ukraine and in the Crimea, and they were fierce fighters on horseback. So how did John rise to the ranks of a general, and how did he save Poland from the Tartars?
Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Let's see here. Let's see here. What had been done by John Sobieski, now at the head of his family, was but a prelude to his future exploits in war. All that had been observed in him up to this time was an impetuous ardor which made him reckless of danger, and which carried him where the mere sense of duty would not require his presence. A single event displays the credit which had been acquired in so short a time. When the Polish army mutinied in the camp of Soboro, a city of Little Poland up on the borders of Podolia, and every method, such as persuasion, to which was added menace and even cannon of the Lithuanian troops, had been tried in vain by the commanding general, and the attempt given up as hopeless. John Sobieski asked that he might try what he could do in inducing the men to return to their duties. The temerity of extraordinary men is never justified by the success that attends it. It is easy to understand what address and eloquence are needed to persuade men who had arms in their hands. It is not only a matter of personal pride, but it is racial pride, which every true Pole feels when we find that Sobieski, a very young man, which, as we look upon him today, with his grace of eloquence carried his point and thus early showed that empire over the minds of men which would have done credit to a consummate general, in this feat advanced to the height of glory a youth who had as yet not held no public office. He not only by his wondrous eloquence persuaded those mutineers to return to their duty, but he filled with them a new spirit of loyalty and enthusiasm for their country and its cause. The army advanced now upon the foe in a spirit that can never fail of victory. The battle lasted 7 days, and the loss of the enemy was 20,000 men. A peace was obtained that was in every way satisfactory to the republic, which had become embroiled through her weak and vacillating king, and so much useless slaughter. The immediate result to Sobieski was that he was rewarded by being made the great standard bearer of the crown, an officer of the court and of the army, who carries the banner of the republic at the coronations and at the funerals of the kings of Poland. This was a remarkable rise in a republic which at this critical time in its history, its national history, must be or should have been careful how it proceeds and should confer rewards rather than favors. However, the promotion of Sobieski was both in the nature of a reward and also one of those marks of favors which fate had reserved for him.
Quite unusual character for a young man to be so eloquent to put down mutineers, which is a very risky task. So I explained already what the Tartars, who were the Tartars. What did John Sobieski's, what was his view about the Turks? And what did he consider them as regard as a threat to Poland, even before we come to his historic deeds before the gates of Vienna? It, by the Turks, I mean the Ottomans.
Yeah.
What do we know from the historic record about that?
See. Oh, still talking about the Muscovites and the Cossacks. Mm.
Yeah, Poland was surrounded by enemies on side. She was waging wars with the Muscovites, who we call the Russians today. The Cossacks were another people known for their cavalry warfare living in the Ukraine. The Ottomans were to the south. The Holy Roman Empire was to the east. Occasionally, Poland often fought wars with the Holy Roman Empire. Later on in history, you'll find with the Prussia was on the northwest, and the Prussians, and then the Teutonic Knights were on the north.
Yeah.
In this period of the 16th century, the Ottomans had a general plan to conquer all of the Balkans and invade Europe.
Yeah.
And one nation after another had fallen to them. Serbia fell to them. Bulgaria fell to them. Romania had fallen to them. Albania and Greece had fallen to them. Bosnia had fallen to them. Herzegovina held out.
It says the people felt apprehension and fear from the Turks by just just how quick they moved and how quick they conquered, and but that wasn't Sobieski. He knew their strength and their weaknesses and how fast they could could travel and fight. But during that lead up through all the when he became the standard bearer and learning under those great generals, he learned how to conquer. Just watching and studying and learning. That's where he becomes so great of a military leader.
Okay, so he was a good tactician, not only good at strategy. Now, how was it that he becomes king of Poland, and what was it like during that time?
Mm. Let's see. Mm. At the time, Poland Lithuania was the largest and the one most populous states of Europe. Sobieski became a king of a country devastated by almost half of the century of constant war. The treasury was almost empty, and the court had little to offer the powerful magnates who often allied themselves with foreign courts rather than the state. So by he was so about year 1674 he was made king, and after almost a half a century of constant war, the treasury was darn near it pretty much had moths flying in it because it was so empty. Just trying to keep Poland free and safe.
Sounds like almost no one else would have wanted the kingdom except a true patriot.
Yeah.
And having been elected king, what did he put his what did he start doing?
Well, he wanted to strengthen the country and reform the Constitution to make sure that those senators we'll hear about late. Let's to, let's get to this. Mm-hmm. Let's see. He wanted to reform the Polish constitution to make sure that no corrupt senator could take even power away from the king to hurt the country. So he's working on that. He also wanted to establish his own dynasty in the Commonwealth, regaining the lost territories and strengthening the country by those reforms. He wanted to unify Christian Europe in a crusade to drive the Turks out of Europe. And at the beginning of his reign, the Polish state was in dire physical straits and faced military threats to the north. King Louis the 14th of France promised to mediate a truce between the Ottomans and Poland so that Sobieski could focus his attentions on Prussia. The negotiations and the failure in Sobieski's Baltic goals had to be tempered by the immediate reality of the Ottoman threat to the south.
What was his most famous battle against the Ottomans, and how did he defeat them?
Let's see. So it was the it was the siege, the battle to save Vienna, and and see if I can find what they say. Sorry for the silence, folks. It's just book kind of hard to read some parts. Anyway, let's see here. In In 1683, with his victory at the Battle of Vienna in joint command of Polish and German troops against the invading Ottoman Turks under Kara Mustafa. Upon reaching Vienna on 12th of September with the Ottoman army close to breaching the walls, Sobieski ordered a full attack in the early morning. The United Army, about 65,000 to 76,000 men, including 22,000 to 20, um, attacked the Turkish force, about 143,000 men, at about 5 p.m. After observing the infantry battle from the Kaltenberg hilltop. Sobieski led the Polish Lazaria cavalry among the Austrians and Germans in the massive charge down the hillside. Soon the Ottoman battle line was broken, and the Ottoman forces scattered in disarray. At 5:30 p.m., Sobieski entered the deserted tent of Kara Mustafa, and the Battle of Vienna ended. The Pope and other foreign dignitaries hailed Sobieski as the savior of Vienna and Western European civilization. In a letter to his wife, he wrote, "All the common people kiss my hands and feet, my clothes. Others only touch me, saying, 'Ah, let us kiss so valiant a hand.'" The war with the Ottomans was not yet over, and Sobieski continued the campaign with the Battle of Parkenay on, on October 7th to the 9th. After early victories, the Polish found themselves a junior partner in the Holy League, gaining no lasting territorial or political rewards. The prolonged and indecisive war also weakened Sobieski's position at home. For the next 4 years, Poland would blockade the key fortress at Kamenets, and the Ottoman Tatars would raid the borderlands. In 1691, Sobieski undertook another expedition to Moldova, slightly better results, but still with no decisive victories.
So he did a great thing there at Vienna, that with his that Polish units called like the wing cavalry. They had like feathered wings on each side of their horse, and he did the basic shock attack on the flank at the moment. But he first waited for the Ottomans to engage the Austrian army before the gates and get weakened enough so that he could break them with a charge. So it's very prudent, highly organized, and he was hiding his cavalry on that height. The Ottomans didn't know he had cavalry up there. They wouldn't have left their flank so exposed. We see not only did he fight for the defense of Christendom and Europe, but he did it at the own expense of his kingdom. He didn't get any territory from that. And the Austrians were not entirely just with him. They should have given him some land in return for saving the city. That was the Habsburgs. And the Habsburgs will go on to be much more powerful in the next century, but then decline because they were a dynasty that was not known for generosity with others. And the Austrian-Hungary Empire ultimately fell apart. But what he did was a really noble thing, and he got no reward for it, and he risked his life too, which makes his valor even the greater. When he married, what do we know about his wife and his son? Did he get married before this battle or after this battle, and who did he marry?
Where'd you go? You know, folks, when you prepare for the show and you have bookmarks, then they no longer show up. Let's see. There we go. Among the maids of honor whom the queen had brought from France, little suspecting that one of them was a future queen, the Polish nobles took particularly notice of one whom the queen herself particularly honored. The name of this young woman was Mary Casimira de la Grange, daughter of Henry de la Grange and Francis de la Châtel, had been governess to Queen Louisa. They are also of the Dubois family, which is one of the families of the Capet, married into the Capet family.
The Capuchin family. And when did he marry her?
She was already a widow, and so they were thinking trying to marry within a month after. So let's see here. Pope Innocent the XII never forgot that he gave his benediction to the nuptial ceremony, which he was the apostolic nuncio in Poland, and testified upon all occasions a singular affection for the illustrious pair. So let's see here. She married Sobieski on 14th July 1665. And the future pope was officiator.
I guess if he blessed the nuptials, I think that he was present for the engagement. I think that's what it means. How many children did they have, or did he have only one son, or did he have more than one son, and was his son famous?
Okay. Let's see here. Happy. Okay. They didn't only have one. They had 13 children.
That's a big family. Big family.
Okay. I think the young boy we see in the movie, The Day of the Siege, that rides with him is Yakov. Ludwig Hendrik, Crown Prince of Poland, married Countess Palatine Hedwig Elizabeth of Neuburg. Then twin daughters who were stillborn and died shortly after death. Teresa Theophila Adeligia Ludwika, Maria Teresa, another stillborn after Maria, Teresa Kunigunda, married Maximilian II Emmanuel, Elector of Bavaria, Alexander Benedict, another daughter who died as a stillborn, Konstantin Władysław. Sorry for the Polish. I may have butchered that name. And Jan, a little Jan, died at the age of 2. And another daughter died as a stillborn.
Boy, they had a lot of tragedy in their family. All those poor children dying young. Oh. What role did the Jesuits play with the Queen's court? the fact that she was from France, did they have anything to do with her being brought to Poland to wed the king? And what were the Jesuits like back then?
Well, the Jesuits did educate her, and from what you tell me, the Jesuits were Catholic back then, and so they had a very good, mm, I guess, Jesuit ran chaplain at the castle, at the palace, or wherever, and I would guess they would be the ones saying mass at the Wawel Cathedral in Krakow, and probably in their personal chapel.
And then finally, where was King John Sobieski and his wife laid to rest at the end of their life?
I would like to read about that part. On the 17th day of June, being Sunday, the king took a walk in his garden at Villeneuve. He even dined with some appetite and showed other symptoms of being better, but death was busy within him all the while. A few hours after he was seized with a fit of apoplexy in the midst of the royal family and fell motionless upon the floor. In about an hour he recovered his senses, and regretting, as it were, being waked out of a sleep of death, in which he was insensible of the miseries of life, he said in a language that was familiar to him, "Stava bene, I was well." Every face but his own was frozen with terror. He bore his sufferings with the firmness of a soldier, a philosopher, and a Christian, and employed his last moments in endeavoring to convince his children of the necessity of their living in the closest union. He conjured the queen to have no other interest in the view but theirs, if she desired to preserve the crown and her family, recommending them all to follow the advice of the Polignac, who had more merited, he said, their confidence in his. He exhorted also the senators who were present to preserve mutual concord for the good of the republic, whose welfare would be an object of his wishes, even in the presence of the great source of all power, before whom he should soon appear, and he died, like Augustus, on the same day of the year that he was raised to the throne, in the 66th year, 60, 66th year of his age, in the 23rd of his reign. Those who hated and those who envied the king of Poland gave him, even before his death, the name of Vespasian. If he had one of the emperor's faults, the love of money, he was also possessed by his virtues. Like him, he was raised to the throne by his military services. The charms of his wit, the readiness with which he spoke several languages, his acquaintance with polite literature, and the agreeableness of his conversation, the gentleness of his manners, his sincerity and friendship, his conjugal tenderness and paternal affection, all these qualities which would have made him an amiable man in private life, would have been sufficient for his exalted station. Endued with great strength of body and activity of mind, deeply read in the laws of his country, acquainted with the interests of foreign nations, and versed in the theory of war, equally eloquent in the diet, enterprising in the field. He convinced his countrymen before he was raised to the throne of his capacity to govern and defend them. He possessed in an eminent degree the most of the virtues that become a royal station. He did justice to his enemies as well as to his friends. Always behaved to the latter in the same manner as when he wanted their assistance to gain the crown. The warmth of his temper made him soon take fire, but his heart was void of malice. His cruelty to the Turks after a victory must be attributed to a remnant of the crusading spirit, which upon these occasions, and these only, soared the natural humanity of his temper, which was not sufficiently matured by philosophy. He was often affronted in such a state as Poland, where liberty is always upon the watch against the hand that governs. Yet he never lifted up that hand but against those who offended their country. His zeal for religion was free from the acrimony of the intolerant spirit. Greeks, Protestants, Jews, and some remains of the Socinians lived in peace under his government. This was no small matter, at a time when other Catholic powers were banishing or massacring their subjects in order to convert them. The dignity of a king did not obliterate from his mind in the principles of the citizen, and he was assembled the nation much oftener, softener than any of his predecessors. He spent his reign in the Senate and in the midst of the diets, and in the fatigues of war. He never thought that the palace of a king should be appropriated to magnificence and luxury, but made himself thoroughly acquainted with men and things. Concerning the plan of his campaigns, he listened to every one, but was determined by himself alone, and knowing how necessary the presence of a king is, for the purpose of discipline, celerity, and even victory. He always headed his troops in person till the ill condition of his health prevented him. His country always admired and would perhaps have loved him if a free people were not always jealous of their liberty, and perhaps too if he had been less fond of the queen. He had been singing glory of humbling the Ottoman power, which for a long time had humbled the princes of Christendom. All Europe saw his alliance, and Poland acquired an importance under his government that it never possessed afterwards. Charles XII, the Alexander of the North, lamented his death in these emphatic terms: "So great a king ought never to have died." Him and his wife were buried in the Wawel Cathedral in Krakow, Poland.
And why do you think he may have never been, what do you think might have been the reasons for him not being canonized?
Uh, I guess it probably had something to do with the French crown.
Mm-hmm. John the Third Sobieski, great king of Poland, great hero of Europe. We've covered his life briefly, but he deserves the attention of all Christendom. If it wasn't for him, Vienna would have fallen to the Turks, and that would have caused chaos in Europe. We may have not have been Christians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would you take to the closing of his life that I just read from the book?
I would conclude that he was a really good king and knew how to rule, and he possessed lots of different virtues altogether. As the author said, it showed himself capable of being king. And to assume the crown of a constitutional monarchy, republic, it was called a commonwealth, I think, when everything is going wrong, requires great courage and great self-interest, because when a nation is rich and powerful, every parasite wants to be the chief leader because they just want to, feed off the country for themselves. But when a country is threatened on all sides and the treasury is bankrupt and there's problems everywhere, only great men can stand into the gap and save the country. If it wasn't for him, the Commonwealth probably would have been destroyed in that same generation in which he saved it.
Yeah. His devotion to his wife was strong. When they offered him even greater power, but he said, "Oh, you have to marry an even closer relative to the King of France, and you have to divorce your wife." He's like, "Here's the throne. I'm done." He would not divorce his wife.
God bless him, good Catholic from that point of view. As for the reasons he may not have been canonized, I would say it might have to do to his illegitimate children. He had some illegitimate children. But we can't entirely judge a man by that, because a man can repent and change.
Mm-hmm.
And but so careful is the church about exalting the examples of holiness that they usually choose individuals who never had any illegitimate children.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me so much about King John Sobieski. And I hope we do on Auto Militaris Radio some more programs on the history of Poland, because they're great Catholic people and almost no one knows of their wonderful example of how they melded faith and action and all the other affairs of state together.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can throw some more in during tomorrow's program on Christian activism.
Yeah, he's an excellent example of Christian activism.
Sorry for all the pauses, folks. Get yourself prepared 2 days in advance, and all of a sudden, the bookmarks are there, but the parts you want to read are like they just disappear.
Well, AJ, it takes some practice to do public speaking. I kind of put you on the spot by saying, why don't you do the program today? But you need to learn public speaking. Let me tell you, when I first began public speaking, I was absolutely frozen. I wouldn't be able to speak on. I remember the first time I had to do a program in a TV studio. I was just like a piece of ice. I didn't know what to do. That was 24, 22 years ago. So it comes after a while. It comes. You realize not to be afraid. So don't be ashamed by it. And we just have friendly conversations during our programming anyhow. So that's what radio is about. John Sobieski III. And I think there's some other great Polish kings. We can cover them in other programs. Poland had a wonderful history as a people. They converted in like the 8th, 9th centuries.
Yeah, I like to see what I can
And
dig
they've
up.
been staunch and faithful Catholics ever since. Even after Poland was wiped off the face of the map at the end of the 18th century, they came back after their First World War and after the Soviet era, and they're a very vibrant, strong nation today.
Yeah, got a few other kings I wouldn't mind looking up that are directly related, not just by marriage through the wife of Sobieski and his mom, but that were also on the throne.
Mm-hmm.
That
Okay.
that our Polish members say, man, those guys are great kings as well.
Mm-hmm. And maybe we should do a program on King Stefan of Hungary. He was famous.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there are any saints in Germany who were monarchs, but oh yeah, Henry of Bavaria, King Henry of Bavaria. So we can do a whole series of those, because these are examples for our own age and help us understand how messed up and distorted modern politics is and modern government. Thank you for having me on, AJ. I'm glad to have had the honor to do the questions this time, and rather than always answering the questions.
Yeah. Um. Tomorrow is going to be a little different. We're not sure how everything's going to react when we get published stuff.
Yeah, tomorrow's program is going to be on.
Hope not hate.
Oh yes. Okay. This is that activist terrorist organization out of England. We've crossed paths with them before, and I think this would be the only organization in the world to have done a documentary on them, and we're going to cover what they are, who they're a threat to, and how really mixed up and twisted this group is, and how no one should pay any attention.
So if you like our programs and want to help us get even more independent, because I have a feeling after tomorrow, you won't see us online. Mix up on our own website. Maybe Gab. So we're going to need you to help get us totally independent, where we can have our own servers, computers, everything, build our own C-tube, Catholic YouTube.
Yeah. Yes, what we need is like a Catholic YouTube, because Hope Not Hate has a lot of influence and they're very effective at getting everyone shut off media, but we're not afraid of them.
Nope. That's why we're going directly at him tomorrow.
Because we're a military order, we're not going to be afraid of anyone. Okay, so that will be a great program, and I look forward to it.
Go to our website, ordo-militaris.net. Click any of the show pages, show topics, blog posts. Scroll down, you'll see make a free will monthly subscription. Click the blue-green button. It should give you the option of either one time or monthly. I want to thank our new, one time donor, Scott, a Scottishman, probably in the U.S. with his, how he emailed. So, thank you, sir. Please keep it up. And you can also get that giant flag behind, brother. That'll help the radio apostolate too.
Yeah, so Ordo Militaris Inc. of Montana is a company organized to promote the defense and security of Christians who are persecuted around the world. And Ordo Militaris Radio TV is an apostolate of AJ, as a member of our religious association. And so any donations you send in the name of that apostolate will repay the corporation for the equipment that it purchased and is letting him use to make the needs of the order better known, make the suffering of persecuted Christians better known, and help everyone know their Christian Catholic faith a lot better. So I said to AJ, this flag, which is very popular here, it's the Lepanto flag that was flown at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, October 7th, when the Catholic navies defeated the Ottoman Navy and cleared the waters of the Mediterranean once and for all of the Ottoman menace and saved Southern Europe from invasion. We have this historical reproduction, which is accurate and down to the littlest detail, and we sell them at ordo-militaris.us. You go to the shop tab, you go to the flag link, and we have two sizes. The big one, if you buy a big one, you let AJ know in a comment on Ordo Militaris Radio TV any page, and half the proceeds will go towards the equipment for Ordo Militaris Radio. And we'd like to do live interviews like we're doing now, so that everyone could watch both video feeds live and hear the thing live. We're not yet able to do that, so we can only replay our audio on the site, and we have to put the video on other sites, which leaves us vulnerable to censorship and harassment. So anything you buy at the T store there at Ordo Militaris Radio TV, you see the link at the top, or if you buy this flag at ordo-militaris.us, will go to help Ordo Militaris Radio TV Apostolate grow and become a powerful, independent Catholic media source in the English-speaking world.
And please, folks, leave a real comment. We're getting too much spam on the website. So please go to the website, leave comments on the shows that you like, so we can finally beat whatever spam bot whatever's targeting the website.
Well, with some more monthly donations, we could afford the spam filter. Because you have to pay for that. So we don't yet have one on there.
Good. All right, this is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Davis Wolf.
So that's one of the things you can help if you don't like us being spam.
Okay.